Good morning, I'm Robert Glazer from Wright Chartered Accountants, and I'd like to introduce you to Mitchell Feldman from Cloudermore Limited. First of all, Mitchell, what actually is cloud computing?
So this is obviously a common question for me, and I've got quite a nice analogy for cloud computing. Cloud computing, the true definition is a service that is streamed from the internet. But a better analogy would be, I liken it to electricity. So if we look back into the 1800s, when there was a manufacturing plant where they had plant and machinery, and they had these big power generators in their office. So the more machines they got, the bigger the power generator was, and that power generator needed power. It obviously needed maintenance, and it took up lots and lots of space in the factory. Then came along the national grid.
Right.
And actually what happened was literally overnight is people could just plug into a plug socket and no longer needed these diesel generators. The same evolution has just happened to cloud computing, in so much that people no longer need to have servers in their office.
Right.
They can literally just plug into the internet and get those services from a remote resource where they don't have to worry about the management, they don't have to worry about the maintenance or the availability. It's someone else's problem, they just log in and use the service. So cloud computing is effectively a service that someone else manages for you, and you just use the benefits of that.
So I've heard, Mitchell, about private clouds and public clouds. What do we mean by that, and what's the difference?
A private cloud is where you have your own dedicated instance of a server on the internet. So no one else is using it, it is just yours. You can change the color of the desktop, you can change the way it's configured and really personalize it just for the business. Whereas a private cloud, a public cloud is what is also known as a multi-tenanted environment. Right. If you liken it to a serviced office block, where there is one building with multiple tenants in that building, but each one has their own room.
Right.
So they all share the resources of the security, the building, the heating, but they have their own room. But they can't personalise it as much as they would do with a private office.
So with a private cloud, does that mean the company would own its own server, but it's just not located in the office, or it's...
Yes and no. They would typically have a virtual server, as opposed to a physical server. The whole premise of the cloud is that no one has to own hardware anymore. Hardware is the enemy.
Right.
So it's a virtual server in the cloud, but for all intents and purposes, it's your own dedicated server. You would not know any different if it was yours or somebody else's.
Okay, so should people be going for public or private?
It's a good question, and the answer really depends on the type of business. If they are regulated, and they need to have more control of their data. Clearly, if you had a public cloud, like with a serviced office, whilst you have your own building, there is an opportunity for someone within that building to break into your office.
Right.
It is mathematically possible. Whereas in the private clouds, you have your own dedicated office where no one else is in there. There's no other tenants.
Right.
So it really depends on the need of the business.
Okay. And what are the main benefits to a business of moving to the cloud?
There are multiple benefits. Benefits. I guess the compelling ones are obviously the total cost of ownership is greatly reduced because you're not having to buy your own hardware, you're not having to manage your own hardware, it becomes somebody else's problem. Typically smaller businesses up to around about 250 users don't have the budgets or the appetite to build big data centers to protect their businesses. Right. So typically a business will have an email server, they will have a database server. They can't afford to have multiple servers just in case one of them fails. The whole benefit of the cloud is that your services are dispersed across multiple servers, so there are no longer single points of failure.
Right.
So it actually protects businesses.
So it's more secure.
It's more secure, it's more reliable, it's more available, and it's more diverse, because if you've got multiple offices, you don't have to make your office a data center to service the other offices.
Right. Okay. And who provides this cloud? Where do I buy one from?
So there are multiple cloud providers, and it really depends on varying things such as where you want your data to sit, what you want from the server, and the level of support that you need from it. Right. So there's people like Amazon, who are probably the biggest player in the market, Microsoft, even the domestic iCloud, which most people would have heard of, is a cloud version. But it really depends on what you want and what you need as a business. Depends on who you would choose as a cloud provider.
Okay. And so my data is no longer on my computer, it's now going to be on the cloud?
Correct. That's the thing that people can't get their head around.
Right.
But that's a good thing.
Is it? Why?
That's a good thing because people, when they've got data on their own computers, don't apply the due diligence that's needed to protect that data. When it's on someone else's server, like for example Microsoft, they do the backups for you. Right. They ensure that you don't get viruses. Right. They ensure that you're not hacked.
Right.
There was a thing a while ago where LinkedIn had all of their passwords hacked, which is a really bad thing. And that is a cloud service because you're logging into a website. The one thing that you can take from that is that they knew they were hacked and they put in preventive measures to make sure that happened. Typically, a small business is quite often hacked, but you would never know because you don't have the infrastructure in place to identify that someone is in your system. And these hackers don't come in and wave white flags saying, hello, I'm here. They're just helping themselves to your data silently, and you would never know.
Yeah, okay. And you mentioned backup. Would the cloud provider give me a copy of the backup?
So the backups are done electronically to the cloud. You have full access to them. The data is absolutely yours.
Right.
That's one of the things that we would insist with our clients, that we make sure that they choose a provider where they own the data and it is theirs. Okay.
So, and you talked about hackers and the break into LinkedIn. I mean, how secure is our cloud and cloud solutions?
It really depends on how it's configured. Typically, public cloud, such as Office 365, is very secure.
Right.
But if you think that the security that Microsoft and Google are going to have are infinitely greater than you would ever reasonably be able to afford within your own office.
Right.
So they have things like intrusion detection systems and multiple firewalls.
Right.
All of those things a business absolutely needs,
right.
but it's just not economically viable for them to buy those services.
Okay. And when things go wrong, who would I contact? I mean, is there real people answering queries, or is it virtual people?
So again, depends on the service provider that you choose.
Yeah.
We would recommend that you choose a supplier who would be your single point of contact, because you may have multiple clouds.
Right.
You may have someone that's providing your email, someone that's providing your servers.
Right.
What you don't want to do is to have to call this one for the email and this one for the servers, because you then get into the blame game.
Sure.
So really what you want to do is you want to have a provider who can be your single point of contact, and it's their problem. They deal with it.
Is that where the likes of you come in?
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. Okay. So so our clients call upon us. We own all of that for them, so we don't get into that blame game.
Yeah.
But the whole premise of the cloud is it just works.
Okay.
Typically businesses fall foul of IT where they don't have the systems in place to support what they're trying to do.
And would a company like yours get involved in the specification, the planning, rather than the cloud provider? So I understand there's issues around bandwidth, for example, and connectivity. Is that important?
Yeah, it's really, really important. The success of any cloud solution is the planning.
Right.
You know, the famous 3 Ps. So what we do is we do a discovery process where we will analyse every application within the business. Right. We understand how that will work in the cloud. Yeah. Things like accounting software needs a little bit more consideration than maybe email. So we do the due diligence for our clients, because our clients don't know what they don't know.
Sure.
So we sort of become their conscience for them.
Right.
And we not only dissect their network and understand what can move to the cloud, but we then choose the provider that complements what they need.
So would you recognise parts of their system that might not be right for the cloud?
Yeah, absolutely.
Would there be anything that wouldn't be right for the cloud?
Yeah, so there would be. It's largely based around connectivity.
Right.
So there's some parts of the country that aren't afforded the luxury of fast internet that we are in London.
Right.
And that really wouldn't work for them in the cloud. We've got one particular client in Rye, and they're getting about 1 megabyte download speed. That is not right for the internet. There are some very clever solutions like Dropbox and things that may work, but again, it's potentially for everyone, but with the caveat that subject to due diligence.
Yeah, and is something like Dropbox a cloud solution?
Dropbox is a cloud solution. We love Dropbox. Dropbox is based or built on the Amazon platform. Not a lot of people know that. So they are just using the infrastructure from Amazon to deliver their service.
Right.
And Dropbox is great. There's 2 versions. Not a lot of people know there's a thing called Dropbox for Teams, which is the corporate version.
Right.
So literally all of your documents are out of your office.
Right. I'm assuming there's other products like Dropbox.
There's Carbonite, there's Jungle Disk, there's a few.
Yeah.
It's just, again, it's a requirement where your data sits.
I've heard of something called SkyDocs.
SkyDrive. SkyDrive is the Microsoft version.
Okay.
Very immature at the moment because it's just a domestic product.
Right.
But that's coming and it will be a commercial product.
Okay, fine. And so will all this moving to the cloud save businesses money, or is it going to cost them a lot in migrating and planning and monitoring?
So there's a big debate whether or not the cloud will save money, because you've got the actual tangible cost of cloud versus buying new computers. But you've then got the consideration of what I would call the off-balance sheet amounts, where the cost to the business for downtime or the cost to the business for losing data.
Right.
All of those things are typically eradicated when you do move to the cloud. So one of the questions I'm asked is what happens if my internet connection goes down?
Right.
So, for example, in your business today, if your internet connection went down, you'd still be able to work on a lot of your documents and programs, but your email would stop working because there's no internet connection. Actually, when you move to the cloud, you can still carry on working on your documents, but your email will come in through your mobile phone because that connects via 3G. So you've got that extra layer of protection to the business.
So does that mean we're at the mercy of the likes of BT who are providing the internet lines?
They are. So again, part of the consideration when you do move to the cloud is not just ascertaining what programs and documents could be moved to the cloud, but looking at the underlying infrastructure of the business.
Right.
So if you are going to move to the cloud, we highly recommend that you have 2 internet lines.
Right.
And using different technologies, so one fibre and one copper, i.e. ADSL and maybe a lease line. So then you've got that resilience within there, because the way that it's going, like it or not, is it is all going cloud-based. Everyone is going cloud-based. Internet connectivity is maturing. Things like BT, Infinity.
Right.
So that's it's all about the connectivity.
And what should our clients do if they want to move to the cloud? How should they go about it if it's going to be right for them?
Certainly, the first thing they need to do is to do a discovery to understand what can be moved, how it impacts the business, and what it's going to cost the business.
Right.
They have to understand that whilst everyone proclaims that the cloud is more cost effective, there are considerations such as the migration costs.
Right.
And they are extraordinary costs, they are just a one-off, but you will be exposed to those. So the best time to do it is when your servers are due for renewal, or you're actually in a business pain where you're actually suffering from a result of poor IT systems.
Right.
But if your current system is running, it's not compelling enough at that time to do it then.
So you've got to have a real need.
They've got to have a real need, either, as I say, either renewal or they are in pain.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Mitchell.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.